Welcome to my channel. I'm Gary Wiriawan, and today I want to compare the sharpness of some of Micro Four Thirds wide-angle lenses. Let's go! So, in today's video, I just want to quickly share my result of the test of sharpness of 4 Micro Four Thirds wide-angle lenses. The lenses that I compare in this video are the Olympus 9 to 18mm, this little guy right here, and then the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18mm, this guy right here, and then the Panasonic 12 to 35mm f2.8, one of my favorite lens of all time, and also my favorite super zoom lens, the Panasonic 14 to 140mm f3.5 to f5.6. So all of these lenses can cover somewhat wide angle focal lengths, and some can even also cover ultra wide angle focal lengths. This test is not really that useful, to be honest with you. This is just to satisfy my curiosity. Which of these lenses is the sharpest one? And in real world, it doesn't really mean anything. Sharpness is not the most important thing in your photography. Composition, your knowledge of techniques, your way to evoke emotion in your pictures, that kind of thing is more important than sharpness itself. Sharpness is just one of so many technical terms that doesn't really have that much meaning. Yes, sharpness is important to make your picture look great, to make it have a punchy, strong visual, that desirable look, but it's not everything. Also, this is not really a scientific kind of test. I don't do this in a lab environment. I just do this in real world. I try to find some place that I can lock some composition and try to do this test. And yeah, all of the pictures that you will see are shot at f5.6, and then I'll try to keep the shutter speed the same for all the pictures. And yeah, hopefully with this test you can find something useful. But yeah, after I did the test, I found some really interesting results that really blew my mind, and I really hope to be able to share it with you, and hopefully it can also change your perspective when it comes to sharpness and also Micro Four Thirds lenses in general. So first, let's compare lenses at 9mm. The only lenses that can do 9mm are only the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18mm as well as the Olympus 9 to 18mm. And I took about 3 pictures here, and on the first picture we can definitely see that sharpness is about the same. When I look at my screen, at my computer, I can see that all is very detailed and all is very nice. I don't really think there's too much difference when it comes to sharpness between the Olympus 9 to 18 and the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18. However, I can still see that the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18mm has slightly more sharpness in this picture. Let's take a look at the next picture. And at the next picture, we can also see that there's not that much of a difference. This time, it's harder to see whether the Panasonic Leica is sharper than the Olympus 9 to 18 or not. But from a distance and just by looking at it, I can kind of tell that the Panasonic Leica is just ever so slightly sharper, not by much, so it's not really that much of a difference. However, there's one thing that I want to mention is that the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18mm has a little bit more contrast when compared to the Olympus. And let's take a look at the next picture. Again, not much of a difference when it comes to sharpness, and again you can see that the Panasonic Leica has a little bit more contrast. Not necessarily that much sharper, but it has a little bit more contrast. You can see on some part of the image that the darker parts is darker on the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18, and the Olympus, it's not that it's not contrasty, but it just lacks a little bit when compared with the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18mm. As a bonus, I try to set up a studio kind of shot showcasing my wristwatch between the Olympus 9 to 18 and the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18 at 9mm, still at 9mm, and when we zoom in really close, when we crop the pictures extremely, we can finally see that the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18 is ever so slightly sharper than the Olympus 9 to 18mm. Let me remind you that this is 300% crop, so it's not real world usage. This is just trying to be analytical about the sharpness, and finally you can see that the Panasonic Leica is sharper. Not necessarily that much sharper. On some small text on the bottom of the watch, it's really indistinguishable, but you can still see that the 8 to 18 is slightly punchier because of the contrast and also slightly sharper. Now let's move on to 12mm. There are 3 lenses in my collection that can do 12mm focal length. First is still the Olympus 9 to 18mm, and then the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18mm, and now we also have the Panasonic 12 to 35mm f2.8. All of those lenses can do 12mm. And now let's take a look at the sharpness test pictures. First picture, when you take a look at it at a glance, there's not really that much difference when it comes to sharpness. It's not really that obvious. But once again, you can see that the Olympus, when compared with the Panasonic lenses, it's not as contrasty. So the black, the dark parts of the image is not really as deep when compared to the 12 to 35 and the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18mm. And between the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18 and the Panasonic 12 to 35mm, there's not that much of a difference when it comes to image quality. So on the first picture, it's really hard to tell. But let's take a look at the second picture. At the second picture, it's even more difficult to tell which one is sharper. And also contrast is about the same between the Olympus 9 to 18, the Panasonic 12 to 35 and the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18. All of these lenses almost look similar, so it's very difficult for me to tell. However, with the 12 to 35, I really think it has a little bit of sharpness compared to the other lenses. The Panasonic Leica might be number 2, and then Olympus 9 to 18 might be the last one when it comes to sharpness. But now let's take a look at the third picture. So at this flower pictures, again, you can see dramatic difference when it comes to contrast between the Olympus 9 to 18mm to the Panasonic Leica and the Panasonic 12 to 35mm. And when it comes to sharpness, I really think that the 12 to 35 and Panasonic Leica 8 to 18 is really the winner here, but not by much. Looking at the Olympus picture, it looks fine, it looks sharp, it doesn't look bad at all in my opinion. So yeah, in terms of my perspective when it comes to sharpness, I don't really think Olympus is really that bad. I've seen lenses that is priced much higher than the Olympus, which is not as sharp as the Olympus 9 to 18mm. So yeah, this is the test at 12mm. So now let's move on to 14mm. So now at 14mm, we have 4 lenses that can do this focal length. Still the Olympus 9 to 18mm and also the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18mm and also the Panasonic 12 to 35mm f2.8. But right now we have the Panasonic 14 to 140mm as well. This is a super zoom lens, so it can cover focal length that is not just wide angle. It can also cover telephoto focal length. So in the next few days, I will try to make this same test again, but comparing ultra telephoto focal length instead of wide angle focal length. So now let's begin the test at 14mm. So now let's take a look at the pictures. And on the first picture, we can definitely see that there's not that much of a difference when we compare the Olympus 9 to 18, the Panasonic 14 to 140, the 12 to 35, and the 8 to 18mm. All are plenty sharp in this picture. And when it comes to contrast, again, the Panasonic lenses has more contrast when compared to the Olympus 9 to 18mm. I don't really know why, and I don't really think that the Olympus is not sharp or not contrasty. It's still contrasty, it's still sharp, but compared with the 12 to 35mm, for example, the 12 to 35 is sharper and more contrasty. And number 2, I think on the rank is Panasonic Leica 8-18, and then the 14-140 is about the same sharpness and contrast with the 8-18, and last place is Olympus 9-18mm. But now let's take a look at the second picture. At the second picture, again, the 12-35 is, I think, the sharpest when compared to the others, and the Panasonic Leica 8-18 is number 2, and then 14-140 is number 3, and at the 4th place is again the Olympus 9-18mm. But again, the difference is very small, it's very minor, it's not that significant. Except for the contrast, you can definitely tell that the Panasonic lenses has more contrast compared to the Olympus lens. Again, same pattern here. And then on the third picture, we can see again that the Panasonic lenses is contrasty compared to the Olympus 9-18mm, but sharpness is about the same for everyone. I really think that the 12-35 and the Panasonic Leica has the most contrast and sharpness, and followed by the Panasonic 14-140. Again, Olympus is last place, but doesn't mean that Olympus is bad. I have one extra picture for the test, for the sharpness test. And again, over here, there's something interesting on this picture. This is a picture of a wristwatch, and then it's cropped at about 160%. And it's close range, so it's like a product photography kind of shot. And you can tell that on this particular picture, the 14-140 is slightly sharper compared to the 8-18mm. I don't know if it's my eyes or if it's really the case or something. I don't really know, but it's surprising for me to find out that 14-140 it's slightly sharper than the Panasonic Leica 8-18mm. Still, number 1 when it comes to sharpness is the Panasonic 12-35mm, and then number 2 is the 14-140, and number 3 is the Panasonic Leica 8-18. Last place is the Olympus 9-18mm. So yeah, similar pattern here. We can already tell that Olympus doesn't have that much contrast compared to the Panasonic lenses as well as sharpness, but it's not that much difference again. Now let's do the test for all of these 4 lenses again at 18mm. And right away you can tell at the first picture that it's same story here at 18mm. The Olympus has less contrast compared to the others, but the sharpness is about the same for everyone. Still, the 12-35 may be a little bit sharper compared to everyone else. And the surprising part is the 14-140 can keep up with the Panasonic Leica 8-18mm and the 12-35 as well. Not that different when it comes to sharpness and contrast. Second picture still tells the same story as well. Olympus 9-18 is the least sharp compared to the others, and also not as contrasty as the others, but not by much. Still, the sharpest I think is the 12-35, and then followed by the 8-18 and 14-140, neck to neck. So this is kind of interesting right here. And third picture, still same story. You can definitely see the contrast on the darker part of the image. The Panasonic lenses tends to have more contrast when compared with the Olympus 9-18mm, and the sharpness of the 14-140 is almost neck to neck with the 8-18mm once again, and 12-35 still the sharpest of the bunch. And last picture, the product photography kind of shot right here, still tells the same story, but right now we can kind of see that the Panasonic Leica 8-18mm is a little bit sharper compared to the 14-140. But still, the 14-140 is surprising for me because this is a super zoom lens and I didn't expect it to be this sharp. Almost as sharp as the 8-18mm. Still, the sharpest of the bunch is the 12-35mm. I think that's a given because this lens is a pro grade lens, and the least sharp one is the Olympus 9-18mm. But again, I just want to keep emphasizing this, that the difference between all of these lenses, when it comes to sharpness, when it comes to contrast, when it comes to image quality, it's not really that much. It's not really that significant. In real world, you cannot really tell the difference, and you'd be happy with any of these lenses anyway. So from the test that I just did, we can summarize what we just did right now like this. First place when it comes to sharpness is the Panasonic 12 to 35mm f2.8. I'm not really that surprised right here because I already know that this lens is sharp, it's contrasty, it's punchy, and I really love the image quality of this lens. It's not surprising at all. And then second place, I still think that the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18mm is the second sharpest lens of this whole lens category. And then third place, which is very close to the second place, is the Panasonic 14 to 140mm f3.5 to f5.6. This is the part where I am most surprised. Again, I just want to emphasize that this is a super zoom lens. You can do wide angle, you can do telephoto with just one single lens. And surprisingly, you don't really sacrifice that much when it comes to sharpness and contrast. So yeah, this is wonderful. This is like a new video game cheat code that you can use when you do travel photography, or you just want something that is sharp and reliable when it comes to image quality. Last place, fourth place, is the Olympus 9 to 18mm. Yeah, it doesn't mean that the Olympus is bad. When it comes to real world usage, as I mentioned before, you hardly notice the difference between the sharpness of all of these four lenses. It's just not as contrasty as the others. But again, when it comes to contrast, you can easily do it in post-processing. Just add a little bit of contrast slider and you'd be fine with this lens as well. And that wraps up today's video. So that is all for today's video. I really hope that you find something useful out of this video. And please comment down below what is your sharpest wide angle lens that you ever have, be it Micro Four Thirds or any other formats. Also, if you have any questions about the test or any suggestion for future tests, please let me know in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to support my channel by liking this video, sharing this video, and subscribing to my channel. It will really help me to motivate me to keep making these videos for you. Thank you and goodbye.